Hi, in this video I'm going to show you some examples of student work, previous student work doing the creative motion assignment. Now, most of the examples I'm going to show you are really great examples of some nice work that students did on this assignment. It's deceptively challenging to do this assignment well because not only do you have to freeze or blur motion, but you need to be creative. You need to show me motion. So the first three photos I'm going to show you, I won't name the student, are actually kind of failures. They are technically correct, but they are not creative motion. So every semester I tell students that it's going to be very disappointing if they go out and they photograph a car and freeze the car in motion, because this is what it looks like. So this car was moving. The student used a very fast shutter speed to freeze the car, and it looks like, yep, a parked car. So part of the challenge of this assignment is to create a photograph where we recognize that something is in motion, whether or not it is frozen or blurred, using a fast shutter speed or a slow shutter speed. So I have a couple more of these, and you can see that all of them were technically very nicely done because the cars had been in motion, but when they're frozen, they just look like parked cars. So let's move on from there. Let's take a look at some successful students who did these assignments. So this is a beautiful bird photograph. This student clearly knew I loved birds and was trying to get in good with me. But what I particularly like about this is a frozen motion photograph of a gull, of a ring-billed gull, I believe. And what she did is she caught the gull in midair. So we're really conscious that this motion has been frozen. The gull's wings are up, his feet are dangling, and there's a gull on the water below. So we're really, really conscious of the frozen motion, the fact that we've caught this motion in the middle of the action. And that's what you're really going for when you freeze motion. Now, if you want to get to the other extreme, you can do extremely long exposures that blur motion. This student went out onto a pedestrian bridge in the middle of the night. He actually went out with another student, so they were with each other. I don't want you to go do this by yourself. And his partner, his friend, actually walked very, very slowly as he did this very long exposure on a tripod. So you can see up here, you can see Zach's face show up at intervals and just the ghost of his feet. So this is a nice extreme example of a very, very long exposure and very blurred motion. He had it on a tripod, so everything else is still, but the person who is moving is blurred. Nice, nice, beautiful frozen motion. I even love the tilt of this photograph. I love the shadow. And this is what we call the height of motion. So if you jump into the air, there's a moment just before, it's like a split second just before you come down, where there's a little bit of a hesitation. So you're up and you're at the height, and then you start to head down. And this is the best place to catch that motion if you want to freeze it in midair. So we can see that he is off the air, his feet are dangling, and so we have him in mid-motion. Great example of a nice fast shutter speed frozen motion. This is by the same student, and this is a wonderful example of blurred motion. And not only that, but what we call panning. She's moving the camera so that the background blurs and almost freezes the subject, almost. It's really quite wonderful, but she's moving the background, moving the camera with the subject to get that effect. This is another one by the same student. Wonderful, nice frozen motion in midair. I love that shadow and the composition. Now this is a classic freeway long exposure, what we call gosh, there's a name for it, and I'm not coming up with it right now, but you do a long exposure with the cars going by, light trails, and you get what are called light trails. So this is that same student. This, you need to go out at night with a tripod, take somebody with you, and find an overpass where you can make photographs like these. Another fabulous frozen motion. I really like this because we can see that the ball is hovering in midair, that beautiful sharp-edged shadow, hard light on the ground. I don't even mind that there's a little bit of the shadow of the figure in the bottom right, although it might have been a little stronger without it, but I still think this is a great picture. Now, this student really decided to play with the abstract possibilities. And you know what? I think this is a flower. I believe it is a daffodil. And she used a very slow shutter speed and just moved the daffodil continuously in her camera as well as she did it and got this beautiful abstraction. She also did this really creative photo that I found really fascinating and inspired me to try the same thing last summer. So this is blossoms falling from a tree, but she focused on the background so that the blossoms that are falling are frozen but out of focus. So there's a difference between when the motion of something is frozen and when it is in or out of focus. And she's capturing both at the same time. Very nice classic photograph of a runner frozen in mid-stride. And then a few minutes later, he actually did some panning and got this great shot of this guy running. Those beautiful, colorful shoes look like he's wearing crazy sort of curved paddles on his feet, but that's just the motion blur. This is a really spooky photograph, very long exposure. And she shook her camera as she made it. The stairs didn't move, but she moved her camera and created this wonderful sort of ghostly stairway. Great frozen motion. That is a classic skater shot. I love that this student caught the skateboard in that beautiful curve between his legs. It's really great. It helps a lot that we're getting the back of the skateboard with all those bright colors, so it pops right out compositionally. This is very simple but very beautiful. Flags flapping in the wind. Nice frozen shot. Frozen water. Just classically beautiful. Look how we can see the ripples in that frozen water. This is a nice car shot, and I thought I had another one in this archive, but I couldn't find it. If you're riding in the car and you point your camera out the window and take even a reasonably fast shutter speed, you're going to get this wonderful motion blur that is much more pronounced at the near where you are, on the ground below, and then gets very unpronounced or non-existent as you go out towards the further distance of the photo. And I love that she did this through the window and kept those raindrops in there. Another photograph by the same student. Long exposure of a friend. I thought this was really lovely and simple. It's just a slow exposure on a tripod, and this one woman walked by, and just that single element is blurring. It's very nice. Nice frozen photograph of a dog. I love his little butt and that fabulous shadow. And the toy in midair. So this really gives you the sense of frozen motion. Oh, I believe this is a long exposure inside. She poured money from, I can't remember what she was pouring it from, but it's dropping onto the floor. Beautiful streaks of silver coins. Little long exposure on the keyboard, little ghost hands. Oh, nice panning shot from the same student. So you can see that she's following the child in the swing, and the background is blurring behind. Ah, lovely, lovely, amazing frozen water drops. Now you can see some of them are going fast enough they're almost blurring, but most of them are just hovering in midair. Light painting can be really fun. So this is just a light wand and just flung in a circle. I have a couple of these by different students that I really like. Little frozen basketball shot with no basketball, but nicely framed. I thought this was fun. Little frozen motion or blurred motion going down the slide. Little panning leap. Another panning run. This was on campus way back in the day. Look how his feet are almost vanishing, but his torso here is frozen because he turns to look at the figure, and the photographer is moving his camera with him, so he catches that freeze in the middle of the motion. Oh, I thought this was quite lovely. Very, very blurred bird shot, so you can just make out. And the trick with blurring is to take a lot of photos and pick the ones that work. And this one really works. We see that the bird is blurring, but we also get just enough to recognize what it is. There's that wonderful tension between the crazy blurring and the actual presence. And this is a panning shot as well. You see how the background is out of focus because the photographer is following the bird with his camera. Same photographer, just froze little raindrops on the patio. Love that photo. This photographer went outside and did a couple of photographs of, I think it's a friend's child, doesn't matter. She was a very slow photograph where she was playing with the flowers, and then a frozen one where she was blowing the dandelions, and you can see that those little floaters freezing in the air. Same photographer, beautiful frozen motion of the water with a duck diving underneath. We see all those rings frozen moving out. And this is it's the same photographer. I'm not sure if it's the same scene, but she moved her camera in order to get this blur. This is not quite in focus, but boy, I sure did love it. So I went ahead and included it. And a wonderful, crazy long exposure of a dog. Really serendipitous. This is much like the bird, where you take a lot of photos, most of them just are nothing, and then one is really amazing. And I believe that is it. So I hope that gives you some inspiration. Next week, I'm going to give you more information on the details of how to strategically make photographs of motion.